Today is December 7th, 2020, and it has actually been exactly a month since the 2020 presidential election was first decided. On November 7th, 2020, exactly a month ago, on this day, it was first projected that Joe Biden would end up being the winner of the 2020 presidential election. Despite the fact that Election Day took place on November 3rd this year, the actual outcome of the presidential election wasn't decided until 4 days later, on November 7th. That is when Joe Biden got 20 electoral votes from Pennsylvania. The morning of November 7th, it was projected that Joe Biden would win Pennsylvania's 20 electoral votes, and those 20 electoral votes gave him enough electoral votes to cross over the 270 electoral vote threshold that a candidate needs to win the presidential election. And ever since then, for the past month, Trump has sort of denied the results to a certain extent, and he's also filed many lawsuits. Most of them have not gone through, most of them have been thrown out, but he is basically coming to terms, it seems, at this point that he is not going to be the president in 2021. On January 20th, 2021, Joe Biden will be the 46th president of the United States. It seems like he's just now starting to accept that fact. He's coming to terms with the fact that there's no way to overturn the results of this election. The thing about Joe Biden's lead is that he's not just leading in one state or even two states. He's leading in four crucial states that Trump needs if he wanted to win the 2020 presidential election. Joe Biden currently is at 306 electoral votes. Donald Trump's at 232 electoral votes. Unless there are any faithless electors, that's the final count. But Donald Trump would have to flip Georgia to his side. Now, out of all the states that Joe Biden won in this presidential election, it appears that it's either Georgia or Arizona. One of these two states, Joe Biden won by the smallest margin out of all the states that he won. I know in Georgia, his margin of victory was around 12,000 votes. I don't know exactly how much his margin was in Arizona, but nonetheless, Joe Biden won the state of Georgia by around 12,000 votes, which is a pretty small margin in relation to the total number of votes that was casted in the state of Georgia. In Georgia, there were several million votes casted, and out of those several million votes, 12,000 more went to Joe Biden than to Donald Trump. Which, in relation to the total number of votes casted, yes, that is a small margin, but in terms of the number itself, 12,000 is still a pretty large number. If you were in Donald Trump's position where you were down in Georgia by around 12,000 votes and you were trying to win over Georgia's 16 electoral votes, you would really not have many options because that is a very hard margin to overcome. When you're down by that many votes, it's very hard to do anything to reduce that margin substantially because recounts usually don't change the margin by more than a few hundred votes. Here's the thing about recounts. Yeah, the recounts could count votes that previously weren't there in Trump's favor, but it could also work in Biden's favor. And this is actually what happened in one of the recounts. I forget the exact state it was in. I believe it was Wisconsin, but I may be wrong on that. But there was this one recount that took place in one of these swing states, and in fact, it turned out that they actually found that some of the votes weren't counted properly. But the funny thing is that it actually ended up helping Biden more than Trump. By the time all the votes were counted in this recount, Biden's margin of victory, I think it was Wisconsin, I don't remember the exact state, but Biden's margin of victory was larger than before after this recount took place. So that's why these recounts and these lawsuits aren't very effective in terms of actually flipping the results of this state to your side. The margin of victory that Biden currently has in the state of Georgia, even when the margin is only 12,000 votes, that's still way too big to do anything with because that means that you have to lower the margin by 12,000 votes. That means that every lawsuit you have to file and every recount that you do in that state, not only does it have to count more Trump votes, it also has to not count the Biden votes. And the chances of that happening to the point where the gap closes by 12,000 votes is absolutely unrealistic. So that's just in Georgia also because in other swing states such as all the Rust Belt states and like Nevada for example, the margin of victory that Joe Biden had in these states, that was even bigger than 12,000 votes. The margin of victory in these states were bigger than the margin of victory he had in Georgia. And even in Georgia, when the margin of victory he had was relatively small, that is still a big enough margin to where it's nearly impossible for Donald Trump to overcome that. So Donald Trump's chances of winning this presidential election are essentially 0% now. Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. Unless for some reason he's not able to serve on January 20th, then I guess Kamala Harris would have to become the president. But there's almost no chance of that happening, so in all likelihood, Joe Biden will become the president of the United States in just over a month. But Now that Trump has lost his presidential election, what does he do? Because he did lose. He did lose. He is just now coming to terms with that loss. It seems. I guess he realizes that he's not going to win now, and that Joe Biden will become the next president, even if he doesn't actually say it out loud in public. He realizes that he's not going to be the president. He has no chance. So that is why he has already started talking about potential runs in 4 years from now, potential presidential runs in 4 years from now, in the 2024 presidential election. If Joe Biden is the presidential election nominee in 4 years from now, then it's potential we could have a Joe Biden versus Donald Trump presidential election in 2024, just like we just had this year. And that would be kind of interesting. The last time that there were two candidates, two major political party candidates who competed against each other for two election cycles in a row was in the 1950s. In 1952 and 1956, both Dwight Eisenhower and Adlai Stevenson were the main candidates in these elections. Dwight Eisenhower both times was the Republican nominee, Adlai Stevenson both times was the Democratic nominee, and both times Dwight Eisenhower won against Adlai Stevenson. So it would be pretty interesting to see that happen, Joe Biden versus Donald Trump again, a second time around, but that would mean two things. One, which is a lot more likely, that Joe Biden is once again the presidential nominee in 2024 for the Democratic Party. Now, there's a good chance that this will be the case, but there's also a chance that he chooses not to run a second term, that he decides that one term is enough. And there were actually some reports during the primary season that he might only serve one term if he got elected. And now that he got elected, we can actually see if he decides to take a second term after his first term is over. But because he will be 82 at the end of his first term, he's currently 78, there is a chance that he might choose not to run for a second term because he'll already be above the age of 80 by the time he's done with his first term. And that is nothing against Joe Biden, it's just that anybody at that age would probably have at least a little bit of trouble uh, being the president of the United States. But we'll have to see in 4 years from now, or I guess 3 years from now, whether or not Joe Biden actually decides to be the nominee for the Democratic Party once again in 2024, or if he decides that one term is just good enough and that he's going to retire. But what's a lot less likely is Donald Trump being the Republican nominee 4 years from now for the 2024 presidential election. Donald Trump has already lost this presidential election, so if he decides to run in 2024 for the Republican primaries, then a lot of people might be skeptical to vote for him a second time around, or I guess third time around if you count 2016 and 2020. Third time around because he already lost in 2020, 4 years earlier. Now, there are some reports that he might go to jail sometime between now and 2024, and if that were to happen, then running for president is definitely out of the question. You can't run for president if you're in jail. And the reason why he might get arrested is because of some tax fraud that he's committed. I really don't know the details about Trump's legal history. I was thinking of making a video talking about Trump's legal history and the potential trouble he might find himself in the next few years, but I really don't know much about that at all, so I decided not to make a video on that. But I've heard reports that in the next couple of years, because of some shady dealings that he's made in the past, he could potentially get prosecuted by the Manhattan local government or the New York state government. I guess at the federal level, he could find a way to pardon himself, but that won't apply at the state level. So, at the state level, at the local level, Donald Trump is still subject to investigation. And if he gets arrested, then yes, a presidential run is out of the question. Can't run for president if you're in jail. But if he doesn't get arrested, if he manages to avoid getting arrested, if he manages to avoid getting prosecuted, then would he run for president in 2024? At first, I was thinking the answer was no. I think he would just give up. But after what all has happened in the past few weeks, and Trump himself even teasing at a 2024 presidential election run, I'm really not sure because for right now, at this point in time, right after Trump has lost, and the loss is still pretty fresh in the minds of most people, it's easy for people to say, it's easy for Trump himself to say as well that he's going to run in 4 years from now. It's easy to say that when you've just lost and you're probably pretty angry about that, that you want a rematch in 4 years from now, you want another chance at it, but 4 years from now is also a very long time from now. Think about how long ago 2016 was, or I guess early 2017. That's how long 2024 is from now. 4 years. So even though in the moment Trump might feel like he wants another shot at the presidency, he might not feel that way in 3 years from now, or I guess 2.5 years from now. 2.5 years from now, in early 2023, is when people would start filing their candidacy for presidency. People will start running for president in early 2023. And I guess the debates would start taking place in the summer of 2023, but that is still over 2 years away from now. That is plenty of time for things to happen. So I don't think it's very likely that Trump will run for president in 4 years from now. But hey, you can never underestimate this guy. He blew everyone out of the water in 2016 when he not only won the Republican primary, but also went on to beat Hillary Clinton in the presidential election. I remember after the Iowa caucus when Trump got second place, Ted Cruz got first place. A lot of people were saying this is it. It's over for Trump. He's not going to be the nominee. But then New Hampshire came. Trump won that. A bunch of other primaries came along. Trump won almost all of those. Ted Cruz won a few here or there. Marco Rubio, I believe, won like two primaries. And then John Kasich was still running, but he didn't win any primaries except his own state of Ohio. He won the state of Ohio because he was the former governor of that state. I guess at the time he was the current governor, but he was from that state. He was able to win Ohio, but in the end, Trump blew everyone out of the water in the Republican primaries, and then he pulled off a surprise victory in the general election in 2016, and then that's why he's president now, but he's not going to be president in a month and a half from now. So, do I think Trump is going to run in 2024? Here's my final answer. Probably not, but we'll have to see.